I didn't know about the North American model of wildlife conservation until I started working for OHA. So in my mid 40s, right? And I had to learn really, really fast about it. And it's amazing. I think it's an amazing way to manage wildlife. And I'm really like passionate now about every new hunter needs to understand this. It's not just go buy your license and your tag and put an animal in your freezer. I mean, that's the goal, but you've got to understand, in my opinion, you got to understand the underpinnings of it all. Because if you don't, then you don't understand the funding structure for ODFW, and you don't understand the real conservation work that goes on.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Sig Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, Sig Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, Sig Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. Sig Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the Sig Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about Sig Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com.
Amy Patrick, besides having bad taste in hockey, how do you spend your time?
Oh, I see how we're starting this off right away.
Yeah.
I get the tone. Okay.
People need to know.
People need to know. All right. Well, I before we say anything else, shall we talk about the fact that I'm ahead in our bet, though? I mean, if we want to talk about bad hockey.
We don't need to talk about that.
Yeah. So what did you say? I got distracted by bad hockey. What did you even say?
How do you spend your time?
I spend a lot of my time right now on my job working for Oregon Hunters Association. So
what is the Oregon Hunters Association?
OHA is the largest state-centric hunting organization for Oregon. So we're pretty proud of that. We work really closely with a lot of other sportsmen's groups like RMEF and National Turkey Federation, but we are state-centric. We're not national. And so everything that we do and raise stays right here in Oregon. All the battles that we fight are Oregon centric. So we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of battles to fight.
There are a surprising amount, actually. I think more than most folks realize, how many are out there, and we're just trying to keep them all at bay.
So what's the alligator closest to the boat right now?
I would say it's IP13, except that I think that alligator is a little sickly. I don't know if we got to focus on it as much as I thought we were going to have to. I honestly think it's more of a coalesced effort that we need to worry about. What we're seeing in the Western states right now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
IP13. I've been so reluctant to do a show on this.
I know.
Because I think it's ridiculous, and it is ridiculous. But there was a time where the threat started to feel a little bit real. It came up for Oregon and Colorado, I believe.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm not going to say it's not real, because we still have to get to July. They have until July to gather 112,020 signatures. But every month that goes by, I'm feeling a little bit better about it. I watch their financials with the Secretary of State. Like a hawk. I watch their social media and I listen to their, podcasts and things that they do. And, those are hours of my life that I'll never get back, but you pick up some pretty interesting little tidbits on it. But they haven't generated support from national groups. Nobody's funding them right now. Their account is less than $3,000. So while Like, I don't want to take the foot off, the pedal, as far as, being ready to defend against it. I'm feeling a little bit more confident that because they aren't using paid signature gatherers, that they will have a hard time reaching that mark by July. It's a surprisingly low mark, though, and that's one of the reasons why they identified that they chose Oregon. We have the initiative petition process in the state, and we have a very low threshold to get something on the ballot. They're pretty aware of those markers in the states they choose to target. And you're right, they went with Colorado first. IP 16, the Pause Act, that's what it was called in Colorado. They started there. The gentleman who filed IP 13 is from Colorado. He's pretty open about the fact that he's worked with those folks. So we know that it's, they're tied together and it's a concerted effort. Colorado was able to strike theirs down as a violation of the single subject rule. So their single subject rule statutes are a little tighter. Their animal abuse statutes are written a little bit differently than ours. So they were able to use that. We weren't able to. We had a legal team look at it and see, and they weren't confident that we could do that. So we weren't able to stop it before it got started, basically, like Colorado did.
Okay. So let's take a step back and talk about what IP 13 is.
Yeah, that would be smart, right? So IP 13, it is branded as stopping animal abuse, stopping the exemptions to animal abuse. And that's what they're hanging their hat on. Their messaging is that, oh yeah, Oregon has animal abuse statutes, but it has all these exemptions, and those exemptions mean that farm animals and wildlife are not protected the same as domestic animals are. And so that's how they're billing it. That's how they're collecting signatures under that moniker of, stop animal abuse. What it really does is it goes into Oregon's animal abuse statutes, and there's a list of exemptions that protect certain activities. So it protects things like rodeos and fairs. It protects commercial poultry, but it also protects legal hunting, fishing, and trapping in the state. It protects wildlife management. And basically it protects our right or our ability to slaughter animals humanely. So the best way I've used to talk to people about it is my life. I live on a little farm. We have chickens, we have cattle. My husband hunts, I like to fish. Every one of those things would be at risk if IP 13 were to pass, because it would essentially create a no-kill sanctuary state. So you couldn't raise a couple steers in the pasture and put them in your freezer to offset your grocery costs. You couldn't fish, you couldn't hunt. It's a very, very extreme animal rights and vegan agenda that they're pushing.
And they consider milking cows to be a sexual act. Is that correct?
Yeah. So they want to change the abuse statutes so that any artificial insemination, anything like that would be what we would consider just standard practice in a farming or ranching situation. Anything like that would be considered sexual assault. And the kicker is, if you have minors with you, it then becomes a Class C felony. So if you are hunting and you have a minor with you, if you are a grandfather teaching your grandkids how to fish, you then become a felon with this. So it's to say it's egregious, to say it's ridiculous is not off the mark at all.
So, I mean, this seems like something that could never pass. Why is it worth your effort in your time, which you continue to spend a lot of time on this?
Yeah. Because there are a lot of things I think that we have all seen pass in this state that a lot of us have thought, that would never have passed. I don't know that anybody thought that they could walk around with drugs in their pocket and that would be legal. I don't think that back in 94, hunters really thought that we were going to lose the right to hunt with hounds. And in that particular one, only 3 counties carried that. And that's what we're looking at for this. We all know kind of how the political landscape is in Oregon now, and we know which counties can sway the whole state. And I got to be honest, I think probably maybe 80% of people who get a voter pamphlet don't really read what these would do, right? They read oh, this has this many, statements for it, and this has this many statements against it. So I guess I'll vote this way. I'm not saying people are uninformed voters, but I kind of am saying people are uninformed voters.
Oh, they totally are. When I was on that commission to restructure ODFW and come up with some new efficiencies, there was a poll that went out statewide. And one of the questions was, do you know which agency manages fish and wildlife? And it came back at 11%. 11% of the people could say, yes, it is the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And they hailed that as like a great victory. Like we had a really well-informed populace, because in other states, it was single digits. That's crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And yet it's not surprising.
That's not well-informed. That when I saw that survey and that's what came back, I was like, well, the rest of this is inadmissible. Like we don't care. We don't care what people think if they don't have this baseline of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I would carry that into anything else. Like if I went to a mechanic and, he'd scored an 11% on his transmission test, I wouldn't want that guy working on transmissions. Like he doesn't know enough to even get started. And I'm certainly not going to ask him about any other part of the vehicle, right? Like this guy just doesn't know. So we have a population that is ill-informed for the most part. And that's okay. Like you can't be an expert on everything. And I don't know about the inner workings of cities. I don't. And if an issue came up that pertains specifically to what went on in a city, I probably wouldn't vote on it one way or another, because that's honestly none of my business. It doesn't affect me. I don't have enough knowledge to go about it. And then if you have guys that are trying to solicit signatures for a petition like this, they're trying to spin it in a way that makes it seem really palatable. Like, oh, would you like to stop animal abuse? Sign here. Like, yeah, I'd sign that. I'm not into animal abuse. I love animals.
Right.
Sure, I'll sign that. If you can trick 112,000? Yeah, and 20 people into doing that. Now you've got a ballot measure, right?
Right. Yeah. And the interesting
then it's up to the population to vote on.
And listening to one of his podcasts, and this was one that it was an interview he did with somebody, but he basically doubled down on it and said straight out, yeah, we're not really, if they don't engage us in asking, we have to show them the sheet, right? That legally says a summary of it. And he said, if they don't ask us, we're not really telling them that this criminalizes all killing of animals. Like, we just want to get this on the ballot. So those are the kinds of things that you hear when you listen to his interviews and such, things like that. And the fact that, this is being brought by a guy who's never been around animals other than some domestic pets. He's not an animal lover. He's not been around any of this. He watched a documentary and that's what makes him feel informed enough to move this ballot measure.
What was the documentary?
Dominion.
I've
never seen it. I've not really
that one.
Wanted to pay it the time of day, but it's just these things, and it's so difficult to listen to the rhetoric. And of course they're really hanging their hat on animal ag. They're really going hard after animal ag, and of course, quote unquote factory farms, which is interesting to me. And I'm going to see if I can get this thought out in the way that it is in my head, because in ag, what we've seen is we kind of have allowed large scale farming to be broken off and then vilified, right? Factory farming is this phrase that they use, but really a lot of the practices are the same. Sometimes people don't want to admit that, but a lot of farming and ranching practices are the same, whether you're running a huge amount of animals or you're running a small head of animals. Most people AI. Most people, use the same training techniques. Most people, slaughtering is slaughtering. It's not like you're going to get creative, really. It's just the scale at which you do it. So we've kind of allowed factory farming to be broken off and then made a target and vilified, but it's actually caused, problems for everybody in ag and ranching. And I think it's the same way when we look at hunting, right? We've kind of let trophy hunting be broken off and then vilified, right? And so when you see a lot of the environmentalist groups go after hunting, they start there. They start with, trophy hunting is terrible, or, this kind of hunting is terrible. And I just feel like that's a dangerous thing for us to do. Once you start kind of letting pieces basically of what you do get broken off and identified as targets, you're opening up, in my mind, the entire activity, because they're not going to stop there. You've just given them kind of a toehold. And so that's a concern to me. And I would say that's been the silver lining of IP13, is it has galvanized sports groups like nothing else. Because we've got right now this partnership that we've just built, and it's come from IP13. We wanted to try to do this for a long time because we do keep getting kind of these different attacks coming at us in the legislature, in petitions to ODFW, ballot measures and things. But we've all been a little bit too busy worrying about our own individual silos and particular areas, of hunting and fishing, to really pick our heads up and see the attacks and how we need to be more unified. And so IP13 kind of cut through all that and just said, listen, if this thing passes, it's not going to matter if you are a rifle hunter or a bow hunter, it's going to be gone. And so it's actually motivated a lot of groups to work together in a way that we haven't seen before. And I think that's probably going to be the best outcome from this, provided it doesn't get on the ballot.
One of the biggest step ups that I've seen was the reaction to the spring bear debacle in Washington.
Yeah.
And I've said it on here before, but Washington is one of the worst, if not the very worst states for non-residents to figure out how to hunt in. It's really, truly awful. But sportsmen from all across the country who had never hunted in Washington and likely never will all came together to fight against that. Mm-hmm. And they started to recognize that. And now you've got things like howl.org that are stepping up, and they're bringing to bear, these really powerful tools like the internet to be able to get everybody together, and without a lot of effort, now you can go and you can help these issues as they come up in other states. So it's not just every state fighting for itself against nationwide organizations. Now we're actually starting to become a nationwide coalition of sportsmen who are fighting, in all these individual states as they get attacked. So yeah, I feel like we're starting to get smarter as a hunting community. And Howell is doing a really interesting and powerfully good job with that. I'm proud of those guys, and in such a short amount of time too.
Yeah. What you're saying is so true, because what I'm seeing is, so the partnership that we just put together. So Oregon now has the Oregon Sportsmen's Conservation Partnership. And we just stood that up. We had our first meeting in January. And so, we're off the ground. We're running. We've got a wildlife committee. We've got a fisheries committee. We've got a legislative committee. So all these committees are meeting and working on things. And we're across the board in organizations. So we have RMEF is with us, BHA, obviously OHA, but we got some of the smaller groups as well. And so it's kind of elevating everybody to the same level, whether you've got no staff, one staffer, or you're a national organization. The key is we're all sharing information, right? We're all making each other aware of what's going on. And then that helps us to mobilize in a way that I don't think we have before. But I have to give a kind of credit here, because we modeled what we're doing after California. So California has their hunting and conservation coalition, and that's headed by a gentleman named Bill Gaines, who's been a huge for us in getting our organization off the ground. And then now Colorado has just put together something similar. And Washington is looking at doing the same thing. We had a few folks from Washington sit in on our inaugural meeting so that they could kind of get a vibe for what we were doing. And they're looking at doing something similar. And so that's exactly, the states are starting to mobilize now, and really starting to understand we've got to look not just at our own state, but the trend that's going on primarily along the Western states, which is honestly, these groups, these national enviro groups, they've kind of spent the last 5 to 6 years doing a lot of fear mongering. And that has led to some really deep pockets for them. And so, they all have a stable of lawyers. And right now they're just kind of probing the Western states, looking for soft spots where they can really be effective. And so it really is needed for the sportsmen's groups to do this in their individual states. But now we're also making the jump to talk about, maybe at the end of this year, the leadership from all these coalitions will be able to get together and talk. So you'll have leaders from California, Oregon, Colorado, Washington, anywhere else that is starting this up, getting together and, sharing ideas, looking at what's, coming down the pike as far as legislature and commission issues. I sat in on California's meeting, and it's the same conversations. It's the same conversations that we're having in Oregon, just with a little bit of a different spin on it. And the frustrations are the same. We're all trying to find those solutions. So I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing happening with all these different groups coming together like that.
So what else is going on in Oregon that we need to be aware of?
Let's see. In Oregon right now, and for the last 2 years, I think one of the major topics that I don't know if people know about it or not, but beaver trapping. Beaver trapping has been a major issue literally for 2 years. It came before the commission in June of 2020 for the most part. And there was a petition to ban beaver trapping on federal lands, on all federal lands in Oregon. It's just a thinly veiled attempt to stop trapping, basically. But they've come before the commission twice. They've been denied twice. And in lieu of that decision, then the commission put together some work groups. So one work group was to address beaver management in Oregon, and one was to address trap check intervals. It took a year to stand those up for various reasons, but they didn't start meeting until June of 2021. And so that's been my life for the last 2 years, honestly, the beaver trapping issue, which some people are like, why is OHA as involved in a trapping issue? But I will say that the number of times that the phrases hunting and trapping get conflated in those conversations is frightening. And that's why we're one of the main players, standing right next to the trappers, and also Farm Bureau, the counties. Cattlemen have not been as included as we would like to see them, but we had no control over how these work groups were set up, which is frustrating.
Why do people want to end beaver trapping?
People want to end all trapping, but they have attached it to beavers because there is a perception out here in the West, particularly in Oregon, that beavers will save us from climate change. They are unicorns, if you didn't know, that are capable. They have superpowers. They're going to end climate change. They're going to suppress wildfires. Those little buggers can do it all, apparently. So there's a huge push out here to protect beavers. And it comes from, this thought process, which isn't entirely wrong, that they can engineer their own habitat. Because they can to a degree. If you put a beaver in an area where they have the makings of some good habitat, they can do a lot with that. If you put them in a very dry area or with a very incised creek or stream, they're not. And that's just, a fact of nature, basically. But there's a huge group in Oregon that believes that beavers are going to save us, and we need to do everything we can to save the beaver. And so that is where the anti-trapping folks have hitched their wagon. And it's a mutually beneficial relationship between those folks, and they push pretty hard on it. So in the beaver management work group, what we hear a lot is that we need to be having more beaver on the landscape, because more beavers on the landscape mean they're doing the habitat improvement. They're going to save salmon also. And, they're just going to be out there doing all this work. The unfortunate truth is that not all beavers make dams. Some are bank dwelling. A lot of beaver dams are ephemeral. They're, especially in the Coast Range over here, they get blown out in a year. And so you're not seeing these long-term effects without a lot of human intervention already going hand in hand with stream restoration and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of a big convoluted conversation, but at the base of it is a very serious anti-trapping movement.
People who are pro beaver, as far as conservationists, end up like really pro beaver.
Oh yeah.
I don't know anybody who's like, beavers are, yeah, okay, take them or leave them. Like people go really, really nuts over them, and they do give them more credit than what they are due for my money, anyways. And there's a gentleman here locally that works on watershed stuff, and he thinks that the beavers are the silver bullet, and I might do a show with him at some point because I'm willing to learn. I really like analog beaver dams, which are easy to put in. Basically, for those that don't know, an analog beaver dam is where you go out and you take posts and you shove them down into the riverbed, and then you weave willows in and out of them, and you can set a dam wherever you want to do all the things that a beaver dam would do, but now you're controlling it. You're not leaving it up to a very large rodent to determine where this conservation or bank stabilization should occur. You're going out and doing it. And it's a great project to get the community and kids involved with. Like you can have all of the good with none of the bad. So analog beaver dams, fantastic. Actual beavers, often very problematic. So here on the Six Ranch, where we've done all this river restoration work over the last decade and longer, we're finally starting to get the trees that we planted growing to a point where they're casting shade over the water, which is the purpose of that tree being there. And the last 2 winters, I've had beavers come through and kill a bunch of those trees. Super frustrating. Like that just set me back a decade on what I'm trying to do with cooling this water off. And the pro beaver crowd comes back and they say, well, they didn't actually kill that tree. They just ate it. And now it's going to shoot out a bunch more sprouts. It's like, we're still a decade behind. Right. It was already trying to do that. And they don't make dams here. It's too fast. It's like these are problem beavers. Do you have any idea what the beaver population is in the state of Oregon?
I don't. And the funny thing, ODFW doesn't either. Nobody.
That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me. How many beavers are getting trapped on public land?
On public land, it's not as easy to define because in our trap check reporting, we don't have a question for that. But I can tell you that the numbers of all beavers trapped across the state are shockingly low. We're talking about, and my numbers are old because ODFW published numbers are only good, I think the most recent is 2016 or 2018. And at that time, it was like 1,300 beavers across the entire state that were taken in a year's time. So,
which is nothing. That's nothing.
There's 160 roughly registered trappers in the state. And so this is what I always find interesting or slightly amusing about the usual arguments we hear about trapping is, trapping, we got to save them. We got to save the beaver because, so many people are trapping the beavers. That's got to be that's the main reason why beavers are dying. That's the main mortality, right? Is human caused mortality. And then in the next breath, they'll say, there's only 160 trappers. Like you're not disenfranchising that many people. So why not go ahead and make it legal? And I'm like, guys, you can't work both sides of the equation like that. You can't say, oh, trapping is the main mortality because it's being done so often. And then also say, oh, but there's only, this small number of people. And so you're not really hurting very many people.
That's such a shitty attitude to be like, oh, there's only 160 people that this would affect. So let's go ahead and do it. I hate that. If you did that about another minority group, that would be so unacceptable. Like, oh, there's less of them, so let's just not worry about them.
Right.
Like, let's shove them to the side. That's unacceptable.
Well, and what it's failing to understand is that we're not here to protect the 160 trappers. I mean, we are, but that's not it. We're here to protect the opportunity, right? We're here to protect the opportunity of anybody who may want to go and do that. Just like, and I relate this back to the bump that they've seen in license and tag sales in the last 2 years, right? Before COVID, hunter numbers and angler numbers were lower, right? And they've had this huge, they call it the COVID cohort, I think. They've had this huge bump in numbers now in the last 2 years. That's opportunity. Those are opportunities. We've been protecting the opportunity for those people to do that. Should they find value or time or what have you, to go out and hunt and fish and trap, that's what we're protecting, is that opportunity and that ability. It's not measured in how many are currently doing it. It's how many, can do it should they so choose. And that's, it's something that falls on deaf ears a lot, as does the North American model of wildlife conservation in these, conversations. So we try to dig into that as much as we can and really make sure everywhere that we're coming from is rooted in science and rooted in that kind of conservation minded piece. But, honestly, I can't tell you how many times in these conversations we've been told that actual population numbers of beaver don't matter. Which is something
really?
to get. Yes, it is. So this work group probably talked past each other, I think, for the first couple months, because the folks on the other side of the table, they only care about what beavers are going to do on the landscape and the results on the landscape. And that's what they want to focus on, because they want to focus on things that are hard to measure, basically, and things that they think beavers can do. And I can't tell you how many times we've been told population numbers don't matter. And I'm like, well, then how are we supposed to develop metrics for management if we're not dealing with a healthy population and we're not identifying population numbers, we're not gathering data on any of that, we're not discussing what are the limiting factors for beavers, what are the biggest mortality causes. I mean, predation. Anytime you mention predation, conversation has a way of slowing way down, and because nobody really wants to talk about the fact that, cats really like to snack on beavers, so.
And wolves.
Yep. Yeah.
The fact is, beaver is one of the most beneficial meats for predators to eat in the wintertime. It's very rich, it has a lot of fat in it, and they're very sought out. And when they are on land, they're incredibly vulnerable as well. And they can't do much damage to a coyote or a wolf or a mountain lion that wants to eat it. So here you have something that doesn't move all that fast. So it's not a huge expenditure of energy to kill it. It's not going to hurt you. And it's also a huge resource in nutrients. Like, why wouldn't every animal out there want to eat them?
It's like the Krispy Kreme of nature.
Yep, totally. So yeah, beavers get eaten. The other thing is, like, we owe beavers everything, and we owe beaver trappers even more, because without beaver trapping, we don't have a United States as we know it. We certainly don't have a Western United States. It's incredible to me that we can put a beaver in the middle of the flag and be like, look, like we formed everything on this. And then be like, yeah, let's forget about that though. Let's just completely abandon our history and our culture and just not do that anymore. One of the things that I bring up all the time, and maybe it's a stupid argument because people don't take me seriously, but when they talk about being opposed to trapping, nobody's opposed to trapping mice, right? And what's different? What's different between trapping a mouse and trapping a beaver?
I don't think that's a stupid argument. Honestly, I don't, because in some of the conversations around trapping that I've had, everybody has their animal that they picture, right, in their mind. For some folks, it's coyotes, right? They really want to protect the coyotes. For some people, it's beaver, and I've had to remind them that, guys, because I live in grass seed country over here, right? Everywhere around me is a grass seed field. And I can't tell you how many times I see those guys out there on their four-wheelers running, for gopher traps, vole traps. And, you got to remind people that when we're talking about trap check and damage control, that we're not just talking about the animal you have pictured in your mind, right? We're also talking about these rodents and these issues. And so anything that you're, wanting to put up there as the picture in your brain, it's not the whole picture. There's so much more that goes into it. And why you've chosen to focus on one is, I don't know why, but most folks it's coyote and it's the beaver trapping that they really get spun around.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's probably a resistance to going out and collecting the data and understanding the population and understanding the animal a little bit better, because without that data, you can make your decisions purely based on emotion.
Yep.
And it's easy to garner emotional support in absence of scientific data. Now, Washington took it a step farther and they had the data on their bears and went against that data.
Yep.
And chose emotion instead. That's really upsetting that a governor of any state would create a commission of fish and wildlife that would make a decision like that. That's a shame on them.
And that's one thing I think too, that I would hope more people know about this, but I guess I'm finding in more conversations that maybe people aren't as aware of it. But the commission is as at the discretion of the governor. I mean, the governor appoints, this very well, right? The governor appoints the commission members. And so when I talk to people and they're so frustrated with ODFW, and they're frustrated with management decisions that they've made, or why aren't they doing this, or why are they doing these things? I give a lot of credit to ODFW staff. These folks are biologists, they do this for a living. They're well-educated people. For the most part, any local bio that you would go talk to, and for me, the staff members that I work with, man, they are on it. They know, right? And they know what needs to happen and they know what's going on. The unfortunate thing is that they run up against this ceiling called the commission, right? And they may have great science. And I'll be honest, I've seen it in Oregon's commission. The staff has brought forward great science, a recommendation based in science, months and months of work that they've done to put into what they're bringing before the commission. And the commission doesn't always listen to them. And so I have a lot of conversations with hunters about that, and that, you can be frustrated. That I totally understand that. But make sure you understand, what these guys are up against sometimes and why some things are happening and other times not. I mean, predator management, that's the pinnacle of that discussion, right? If you go talk to local bios, they know what's going on out there. They know what should be happening. But if you go to the commission level with anything about predator management, you're going to get, it's a long road to get them to agree to that. And I think in Oregon, I will say we're making some strides. Our last appointment, commission appointment, was surprising, and I have high hopes, for her. She's a medical doctor, but she's also a master hunter. She's got a trapping license. She's an avid duck hunter. She's an angler. And, she's one of, I think, only 2 commissioners who are familiar with the e-licensing, because she's had to utilize it as a user. And so that's been an interesting change of events for the commission. And I'm a little hopeful that we have, folks who understand a little bit more about how things work, and what hunters and anglers provide, financially and on the conservation end of things too.
Yeah, they provide a lot.
Yeah.
It's not only funding, but it's data, it's interaction. They're the force. Hunters and anglers are the force behind all conservation in North America.
And again, goes back to the North American model, right? And we're OHA just started a new Learn to Hunt program, and we've spent about 1.5 years building this. And one of the main classes that we're putting together is a review and just an educational piece on the North American model, because I think everybody needs to know it and understand it. And this is coming from somebody, who didn't grow up around it, right? I'm not a hunter, even though I work for the Hunting Association. I just grew up on a farm that, it was a Christmas tree farm, and we raised cattle. and our freezers were never empty. So we didn't need the meat. And every fall was getting ready for or in harvest time. So I just didn't grow up around hunting. I didn't know about the North American model of wildlife conservation until I started working for OHA. So in my mid 40s, right? And I had to learn really, really fast about it. And it's amazing. I think it's an amazing way to manage wildlife. And I'm really like passionate now about every new hunter needs to understand this. It's not just go buy your license and your tag and put an animal in your freezer. I mean, that's the goal, but you've got to understand, in my opinion, you got to understand the underpinnings of it all. Because if you don't, then you don't understand the funding structure for ODFW, and you don't understand the real conservation work that goes on, and you don't understand the attacks against it then, right? You don't understand the attacks of wanting to shift funding to something that's not hunting and angling related, because the enviros think it's a good idea and they want money over here. But the reality is they're hunter and angler dollars, so they have to be spent over here. And you just have to have that kind of underpinning. And that, again, that's coming from somebody who had a crash course in it 3 years ago. So yeah, I think it's super important.
I think it is too. I should probably do a show and get into all the tenets of the North American model so that people understand it, because typically that's where it stops. People say, oh, the North American model, and then they might be like Pittman Robertson or Kimball Johnson. And it's like, okay, there's so much more to it. And now really isn't the time and place. I'll do a show on it sometime.
That would be good.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to know about besides people that want to ban all hunting, trapping, and agriculture, and beaver trapping? I know, especially in your part of the world, I preach into the choir when I say this, but I think that obviously the wolf issue is going to be something that's going to be just a hot button topic. We're 2 years out from the 5-year review for the wolf plan, and that's going to be contentious. In the last legislative session here, just this year, there was a bill by Representative Levy just asking for an appropriation of money into the fund that pays out for wolf depredation, confirmed livestock depredation and loss. And it wasn't creating the fund. Obviously, that was already set up in the wolf plan. It wasn't changing how any of that money is spent. It was simply asking for funds to fund that program. And it was 2 days of environmental backlash in the testimonies, and this is this is maybe a little bit off topic, but this is my frustration. Listening to those folks give testimony, it's slanderous. It's just downright slanderous, and you can't push back because everybody gets their 3 minutes to talk, right? And so you can't call them on it, and they make the best use of that opportunity to just say things that are patently false, to be slanderous of livestock and land managers, saying that they're intentionally defrauding the fund, or that they're just being negligent and losing animals and then turning it into the fund for reimbursement. And it's just really, really frustrating to hear, but it was a very clear signal that they will be coming in hard on this, the 5-year review. When we open that plan back up and take a look at it, there were many signals that they're going to come in hard on that. So that'll be the next policy fight, I think, in the next 2 years. Hopefully once we get done with the trapping issues. That's really, really courageous of those folks to go after cattlemen and say that, the damage that they're incurring from wolves doesn't need to be compensated. Like, what a bunch of heroes.
Right. Well, they live in Portland, and so they're more educated.
Obviously,
they know. I have to share this testimony that came in last year about the beaver. There was two beaver bills that were run. But one in particular wanted to remove it from the predatory animal status, which basically means that if they're causing problems on private land, that the private landowner can deal with those. And it's administered by ODFW, but also by Oregon Department of Ag. And so folks wanted to get them removed from that. And one of the testimonies that came in, I thought, man, this just checks every box. I think I actually saved it just because it was so condescending. It was this little paragraph, and it said, I moved to Oregon, several years ago. I've read a lot of books on beavers, and farmers and ranchers just need to be educated. They need to be educated to learn how to coexist. And I went, wow, that was like the trifecta of condescending attitude from somebody in an urban area, just perpetuating this idea that farmers and ranchers, don't have education behind them, don't know what they're doing. So
yeah, they're just a bunch of dummies out here,
right? Yeah,
mucking around.
Let me tell you how you should do this.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I mean, cities are just such good wildlife habitat. That's really the model that I should be considering. As a steward here, is just kind of getting as many people in as tight an area as possible, covering everything in concrete, and then just providing a lot of drugs just to kind of get,
I think the next time that you're out
going
on your property, you need to stop and look around and go, what would Portland do?
Yeah.
And then take that into
I'm going to do that later today. Yeah. I'm going to do that later today. Put that at the top of my priority list.
Right.
No, it's tough. And in the same way that I might feel that, they just don't understand, they're not educated, that's how they're feeling about me too. And that's why communication has to be a big part of this. And we've got to be able to move science into public knowledge in a better way. One of my biggest struggles on this show is every time I reach out to a scientist who is actively studying something, they won't come on the show. They're afraid to, and they'll end up finding their results. If they're lucky, they get it published in some scientific journal that other scientists read. And that's where the information dies. It never actually gets out to the public. So this problem of the ill-informed is a real problem, and it's a problem all the way around. And our ability to access this information is getting harder, not getting easier. Our ability to access information is much easier, but it's not necessarily good information. It's almost never peer reviewed for sure.
Yeah. And it is interesting what we find now, or what I find now, is, the dueling science, right?
Yeah.
Each side's going to throw science at it. And really being able to look at those things, those documents and see, okay, have these been published? Have they been peer reviewed? Who funded them? Right.
Yeah.
And what was the reason why they were put together? Was that a driver towards the outcome? And I think one of the things that I think is at the heart of all this too is just, folks like to get out to nature, but it's a visit. It's a visit for a lot of people. It's not where they live, and it's not what they understand. And I will say, one of the commissioners had a really great, we were having a conversation about several of the topics, and she said, we can't, there's this misnomer that we can't be in nature and respect nature and still eat. And I thought, that's a great statement, because it's so true, right? It doesn't mean that it's mutually exclusive. You can be in nature all the time. I mean, look at you, look at anybody who's, makes a living at it, and still eat. And those things are not diametrically opposed. There's no lack of respect there. It is part of everything that we do. So. I just
Yeah.
thought that was a good takeaway.
If anything, it's more respectful to understand the process and to be a participant in it, rather than just some fifth or sixth party consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and not everybody today has that opportunity, and they're not going to. There's too many people. There's not enough resource available.
Yeah.
So very fortunate for those of us who do still get to get out there and be a part of it, because not everybody does. If they could, it would be great, but the resource can't support it. So
Right.
that's another thing that we've got to acknowledge. Like, there has to be a limit on how many people are actually going out and hunting and fishing, mushrooming, whatever, consuming natural resources, because we have more people than we have natural resources available, which is why we probably, for the time being, need commercial agriculture to be able to feed everybody, because
Yep.
it's the most efficient means we have of being able to do so. So if you like eating food, and if you like being supported by all the people who do things for you, who also eat food, then, then for now, we're doing the best we can. We're doing
Yep.
the best we can.
And don't talk
Yeah.
with your mouth full, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Everybody's only 7 meals away from anarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You get hungry and see what you still believe in.
Well, I don't know anybody who would look at these last 2 years and the panic over the supply chain, and when COVID first hit, the empty store shelves. I mean, people did not know what to do with themselves, right?
And then suddenly we had more people hunting and fishing than we ever had. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's funny how quickly we come back to that. But people get really freaked out as soon as their favorite brand of something isn't on the shelf. So
should people who hunt in Oregon be members of the Oregon Hunters Association?
absolutely. Yes.
What do they get out of that?
They get to be part of the organization that really is in all the rooms right now. I'm just going to, blow our own horn here for a minute, but OHA is in so many spaces and so many conversations right now. We're not a huge staff, but we cover a tremendous amount of topics, and work as closely as we can with ODFW staff. We're in the legislature. We're working with the legislators and the decision makers there. We're in stakeholder groups and work groups, and we're all supposed to be kind of part-time hours, and every single one of us could work full-time and still have things that we couldn't get on our plate as far as topics that we're covering. So we really strive hard to be the voice for Oregon hunters. Whether you're a member or not, we're out there advocating for you. And so if you become a member, we do the Oregon Hunter magazine 6 times a year, so you automatically get that. We do a calendar that everybody tells me is really, really cool. As a non-hunter, it just looks like a calendar to me, but apparently it's really cool for hunters because it's got all the tag, like buy your tag by this time for this, this season, which, I hear that's a big deal. So it's pretty useful. And then you get to be involved in our chapters. So we have 26 chapters around the state. Whatever one's closest to you, you can get involved in. We do a lot of projects, conservation work, whether that's raising money for wildlife crossings or actually getting out and building guzzlers, or replanting after fires. There's a whole lot of boots on the ground conservation projects that each chapter goes out and does. And so it's a really great social atmosphere. It's a really great conservation minded organization. And we'll put you to work if you become a member, and that's a good thing.
How do people do it? Where do they find out more?
So you can go to our website, which is Oregon Hunters. Make sure you get the S in there. So OregonHunters.org. And there is a join button in there. And you can also read more about the work we're doing on wildlife crossings and in the legislature, and maybe even find a banquet that's close to you, because right now is banquet season. So most of the chapters are doing their annual banquets. Everybody's really excited to get back to in-person banquets for the most part. I've been to a couple so far, and they've been packed and a whole lot of fun. And generally they give away a lot of cool stuff, like a lot of guns and things like that. So it's a good time.
What's it cost to be a member?
It's $35 for a year.
$35. Not too bad.
It's not bad at all. Yeah. We don't gouge you. You can do multiple years at different price points. I think 3 years is $90. You can do a family membership for $10 more. But yeah, we're very reasonable that way. And we don't, hound you throughout the year for more money. You pay your $35, you're in the cool club.
All right. Check it out. Oregon Hunters Association, out there fighting the good fight for everybody. And seriously, like I don't have time to run to every commission meeting. That's a 14-hour drive away from me, and, get my 3 minutes to talk. Like that isn't necessarily a good use of my time. So having somebody that can represent me, like Oregon Hunters Association, is hugely beneficial. And one thing that I'll absolutely say for you guys is the commission listens to you more than any other group. Like, you've got a really strong foothold there. And that has come from years and years of trust and working together and finding solutions. And I commend you for that. And I commend you personally for taking all this on. And I really want to thank you for everything that you've done, because you're doing it for other people. This isn't just benefiting Amy. This is benefiting all the hunters and anglers and trappers in the state of Oregon. You're doing awesome. Proud of you.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'm glad we finally had a chance to talk.
Yeah, me too. All right. Thank you, Amy.
Yep.
So I found this old ad, and there's like dudes dressed up like construction workers, and a guy's got a jackhammer, and there's a crane, and they're moving all these big steel beams and stuff.
Aladdin Stanley Thermos. Stanley, the tough, all steel thermos bottle that's completely dependable.
They're showing this thermos like falling off this building and hitting all this other construction stuff.
And built to take a bounding year after year. Get the top one.
Well, it lands in a wheelbarrow. The guy grabs it out of the wheelbarrow. Now he's going to pour himself a cup of coffee. I love these cheesy old ads. And most of the time, like, they're lying to us, right? That's most of what marketing used to be, was just like telling a lie, or at least telling a version of a lie that made you think that you needed this thing. But I'll tell you what, when it's cold out like it is right now, the only way to keep liquid and not freezing in your pack is by putting it in something that's insulated. So packing a thermos in the wintertime is really smart, whether it's for a hot beverage like coffee, or if you just want to bring some water with you, which is a really important thing if you're going to be out adventuring around in this snow that we've got all over the country. And I think you should be, because it's a great time of year to get out and about. This is both a comfort and a safety thing. If you want to get something from Stanley, which I encourage you to do, you can use the discount code 6RANCH. That's the number 6 in the word ranch, and that'll get you 25% off of just about anything on their website. I encourage you to do that. They're great supporters of the show, and great supporters of this audience. And I love you guys. So stay warm out there, have a nice warm drink, and make sure you're drinking it out of a Stanley product. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at 6Ranch Podcast, or me at 6Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the 6Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the 6Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.